The circulatory system is very much involved in carrying even the gaseous waste or the nitrogenous waste for their elimination. The red blood cells or erythrocytes is red in color due to the presence of complex conjugated protein called hemoglobin. Leukocytes are nucleated, whereas RBC cells are enucleated. Hello everyone, welcome back to session 2 of this chapter called Body Fluids and Circulation. Myself, B. Shobharani from the Department of Biology, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, the Temple of Excellence. Hope you remember in my last session, we started off with a very interesting physiological process called body fluids and circulation. All of us know how important this physiological process is for a human body, as it is in circulation. It is responsible for carrying the nutrients, the oxygen and other mineral elements, as well as carrying the impurities that are produced in the body through blood circulation. And we also studied that the circulatory system is very much involved in carrying even the gaseous waste or the nitrogenous waste for their elimination. And all of us know that the circulatory system is made possible by a fluid, body fluid, that is called blood. And we all know that blood is a liquid connective tissue which is made up of two very important components. One is called plasma, the other one is called the blood cells or the corpuscles. So already we studied in the last session about plasma, but as we all know that 50 to 55% of the blood is made up of plasma and has around 6 to 8% of plasma proteins like globulins, then like albumin, right? So, and we all know that the plasma without clotting factor is called as serum. So the next very important part of the blood is the corpuscles or the blood cells. All of us know there are three types of blood cells in the blood, that is RBC, which is otherwise called erythrocytes, then WBC, that is white blood cells, and the blood thrombocytes, or what we use the word called blood platelets. Blood platelets. So white blood cells, or they are also called as what? Leukocytes. Thrombocytes. Blood platelets are called thrombocytes. Here you can see blood platelets, erythrocytes, then lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are again, here you can see the macrophages, monocytes, neutrophils, eosinophils and basophils. Anyhow, we are going to study about all this in the coming slide. So let us move on to the study of the formed elements or corpuscles, or in other words, we use the word called blood cells. Erythrocytes, RBC cells. All of us know blood is red in color, made up of very important RBC cells. And we know that RBC cells are responsible for carrying the oxygen. So as you know, blood is red in color, and RBCs, that is also known as RBC, red blood cells, is the most abundant of all the cells of the blood. So which is found in more abundance than, when we see which cells are found in abundance in the blood, definitely it is erythrocytes. Blood count, I think you might have come, when we go for a blood test, they count the number of RBC cells. And if number of RBC cells are less, we use the word called anemic, right? So erythrocytes, also called as red blood cells. Why it is red in color? Because it is carrying a very important protein called hemoglobin, which is a protein pigment, red pigment. Then also known as RBC, is the most abundant of all the cells of the blood. 5 to 5.5 millions of RBC are found per mm cubic of the blood. So that is how we find that blood RBC are found in more number in the blood. That is around 5 to 5.5 million RBC cells are found in the blood. Produced from the bone, red bone marrow in the adult. So RBC cells, I think already we have studied. Bone marrow cells. Bone is not hollow. It is having a marrow, and there are two types of marrow. One is called red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow. Yellow bone marrow. The red bone marrow produces RBC cells and the yellow bone marrow produces WBC cells. More number of RBC, less number of WBC cells. As we know, white blood cells defend the body from disease-causing organisms. So, 5 to 5.5 million RBC are found per mm of the blood produced from the red bone marrow of the adult. So, RBCs are devoid of nucleus. So, it is not having nucleus in most of the mammals. And in what shape it is? It is biconcave in shape. I think you might have come across sickle cell anemia, a very common genetic disorder where the RBC cell, which is biconcave, will become sickle shape. I think you might have come across, right? So, formed elements are nothing but the corpuscles or the blood cells. First, very important is, as I said, there are three very important blood cells or corpuscles, namely RBC, erythrocytes, WBC, leukocytes or white blood cells, thrombocytes or blood platelets. Blood platelets are very much involved in clotting, bringing about the process of clotting of blood. As I already said in the last session, what will happen if blood does not clot? There is continuous oozing of blood. Ultimately, the person will die or collapse. So, erythrocytes, also known as RBC or red blood cells, is the most abundant of the cells of the blood, and 5 to 5.5 million of RBC is found in the blood, produced from where? From the red bone marrow of the adult, and RBCs are devoid of nucleus in most of the mammals. Then they are biconcave in shape. Then red in color. As we know, the blood is red in color. So red in color due to presence of a complex conjugated protein called hemoglobin. All of us know blood is red in color. And hemoglobin, which is a red pigment, is a carrier of oxygen. As we know that blood is very much involved in carrying oxygen. What is that which carries oxygen in the blood? It is the hemoglobin. And hemoglobin has more affinity towards oxygen. So it has more affinity towards oxygen. Affinity means more, it loves more oxygen. So when it is carrying oxygen, it is called as what? Oxyhemoglobin. And we also know that at the same time, it also carries the gaseous waste that is called carbon dioxide. So then it is called as carboxyhemoglobin. It is called as carboxyhemoglobin. So red in color due to presence of complex conjugated protein called hemoglobin, and 12 to 16 gram of hemoglobin is present per 100 ml of blood in a healthy body. So I think you might have come across when we go for a blood test, they test the amount of hemoglobin present in the blood, and minimum it should be how much? 12 to 16 gram of hemoglobin present per 100 ml of blood in a healthy adult. Suppose if it is less than that, then means they are anemic. So it has to be around 12. So the range is around 12 to 16 grams. And RBCs have a average lifespan of how many days? 120 days. After which is destroyed in the spleen. So hence spleen is called as what? Graveyard of RBCs. So spleen is commonly known as what? Graveyard of, it stores all the dead RBC cells. So RBC have red blood cells or erythrocytes is red in color due to the presence of complex conjugated protein called hemoglobin. And what is the average amount of hemoglobin should be present in a normal healthy adult? That is 12 to 16 grams of hemoglobin should be present per 100 ml of blood in a healthy adult. Then RBC have an average lifespan of how many days? 120 days, after which it is destroyed in the spleen. Then spleen is commonly known as what? Graveyard of RBCs. So here you can see the beautiful picture of RBCs. So here you can see designed to carry oxygen, found in blood, large surface area for oxygen to pass through, contains hemoglobin which joins with oxygen, has no nucleus. So moving on to the leukocytes. Leukocytes are nothing but called WBC cells. Leukocytes, here you can see leukocytes. So leukocytes, also known as white blood cells. Why they are called leukocytes? They are colorless. They don't have hemoglobin. As I said, they defend our body from disease-causing organism. They act as soldiers in our body, defending our body from the entry of the microorganisms. Then they are colorless due to the lack of hemoglobin. As we know, leukocytes means what? Colorless cells. Why they are colorless? They do not have hemoglobin and they are nucleated, whereas RBC is enucleated, whereas the leukocytes or WBC cells are nucleated and relatively lesser in number when compared to RBC. How much was RBC? 5 to 5.5 millions of RBC cells are found in the blood. But here, the number of WBC cells is lesser when compared to RBC. We find more RBC cells than WBC cells. So they are nucleated and relatively lesser in number, which averages around 6,000 to 8,000 mm per, that is mm cubic of blood. Then we have two main categories of WBC. One is called granulocytes, the other one is called agranulocytes. So one is granulocytes, the other one is called agranulocytes. Here you can see, right, agranulocytes and agranulocytes. So we have two main category, that is in granulocytes it is neutrophils, then basophils, then eosinophils, then we have agranulocytes, lymphocytes and monocytes, lymphocytes and monocytes. So these are called as what? Granulocytes. And these two are called as what? Agranulocytes. The very word itself will tell you. Granular. Granules means what? Small structures. So if they are present, we use the word called granulocytes. If they are absent, we use the word called granular. Right? So what are leukocytes? Leukocytes are also known as white blood cells or WBC cells. They are colorless. Why they are colorless? When compared to RBCs, red color. Why it is red color? Because of presence of hemoglobin. Why WBC is colorless? Because it is not having hemoglobin, that is a red pigment. And their leukocytes are nucleated, whereas RBC cells are enucleated. RBC cells are more in number, WBC cells are less in number. Around how much? 6,000 to 8,000 mm of 100 ml of blood. And the main function of RBCs is to carry oxygen. The main function of leukocytes or WBC cells is to defend our body, act as soldiers in not allowing the microorganisms to enter our body. And the WBC cells are of two main category, that is based on their granular structure. They are called as granulocytes and agranulocytes. Granulocytes include what? Anyhow, we are going to study in the next slide. What are neutrophils, basophils and eosinophils? These three come under granulocytes and these two come under agranulocytes. So what are agranulocytes? Lymphocytes and monocytes include in agranulocytes. Now let us study one by one. Functions of leukocytes, that is neutrophils, basophils and eosinophils. That is of granulocytes. So here you can see neutrophil, eosinophil, basophil, monocyte and lymphocyte. So these are agranulocytes. And these three are granulocytes. Now neutrophils. 60 to 65% of the total WBCs are phagocytic in nature. What do you mean by phagocytosis? If any foreign particle enters our body, it is going to engulf. So that process is called phagocytosis and the nature is called phagocytic in nature. So neutrophils, as I said, WBC cells act as soldiers in our body, not allowing any foreign particle to enter our body. If at all it enters, it is going to engulf the foreign particle or the microorganism, and that is made possible by the neutrophils. And neutrophils constitute of WBC how much? 60 to 65% of the total WBCs are phagocytic in nature. Then basophils 0.5 to 1% secretes histamine, a very important protein called histamine, serotonin and heparin, and also involved in inflammatory reactions. What do you mean by inflammatory reactions? For example, like if you have a fall or a wound, so that particular area gets reddish in color and gets swollen up. So the basophils will come near that particular area and causes inflammation. So that is an indication that they are always ready, just like soldiers of a country, how they are always ready to fight against the enemies. In a similar way, these are always ready to attack the microorganisms or the foreign particles that is going to enter our body. So eosinophils 2 to 3% resist infection and also associated with allergic reactions. So neutrophils, how much? 60 to 65% of the total WBCs are phagocytic in nature. Basophils, here you can see the basophils. Here basophils 0.5 to 1% secretes histamine, serotonin and heparin. All these are the types of proteins. And also involved in what? Inflammatory reactions. So eosinophils 2 to 3% resist infection. So they don't allow the body to get infected with the microorganisms, or they don't allow the foreign particle to enter our body. So they resist infections and also associated with inflammatory reaction. Then comes the agranulocytes. Agranulocytes, that is lymphocytes, which are also called, as we all know already, anyhow you are going to study about this in detail in second PUC in a chapter called Human Health and Diseases, where we have T cells called T lymphocytes and B cells called B lymphocytes. So lymphocytes means T thymus it is called, right? So T cells and B cells constitute how much? 20 to 25% and involved in the immune response of the body. All of us know how important immunity is to the body. What do you mean by immunity? Ability of the body to fight against the disease-causing organisms. So at this point of time where we all are facing coronavirus, boosting our immune system is very important. What will happen if our immune system is weak? Then it will be prone to any disease-causing organisms, may it be even coronavirus or any other disease-causing organism. So first and foremost is we should be very strong enough. Our body should be strong enough and not allow any microorganisms to enter our body so that it can cause diseases. So that very important process is made possible by lymphocytes. So the immune system is made strong by lymphocytes, namely the T lymphocytes and B cells, and constitute how much? 20 to 25% are involved in the immune response of the body. Next comes monocytes, that is 10 to 15% becomes macrophages. Again, what do you mean by macrophages? For example, if any foreign particle comes, so it is going to engulf. So these are called as macrophages. So engulfing any foreign particle entering our body is called as macrophages. So what are the functions of leukocytes? Neutrophils, 60 to 65% of the total. As I said, the WBC cells are broadly classified into two types. One is called granulocytes, the other one is called agran. Granulocytes include what? Yeah, neutrophils, basophils and eosinophils. Agranulocytes include what? Lymphocytes and monocytes. So neutrophils, 60 to 65% of the total WBCs are phagocytic in nature, and basophils constitute around 0.5 to 1% of WBC, secretes histamine, serotonin and heparin, and also involved in inflammatory reactions. Eosinophil constitutes how much? 2 to 3% resist infection and also associated with allergic reaction. And moving on to the agranulocytes, the second category of WBC cells, that is T cells and B cells, constitute how much? 20 to 25% and are involved in the immune response of the body. Then monocytes constitutes around how much? 10 to 15% becomes as, they work as what? Macrophages. Then thrombocytes are blood platelets. Very, very important. These are very much important. Here you can see the thrombocytes, or what we use the word called platelets. What are thrombocytes? I think, as I said, there is one very important mechanism inside our body, inside the blood circulatory system, called clotting, or it is otherwise called coagulation. So, but the blood should not clot inside the body. But for example, like if there is a cut or a wound, so you can see the continuous oozing of blood. But what will happen if blood doesn't clot? It has to stop oozing. And that is made possible by the clotting factor. As soon as the blood comes in contact with the atmospheric oxygen, a clot or a fibrin is formed near the cut or near the wound, and the blood will stop oozing. So this is a very, very important mechanism to happen. And clotting has, but when during the process of blood transfusion or blood donation, clotting should not happen. But at the time when there is a wound or a cut, clot has to happen. So that is made possible by the third type of blood cells called thrombocytes or platelets. So as we know, thrombocytes are also known as what? Blood platelets, produced from fragmentation of megakaryocytes. Mega means big nucleus, we can use it. Produced from fragmentation, here you can see fragmentation of megakaryocytes. Blood normally contain that is 1,50,000 to 3,50,000 platelets, and involved in releasing thromboplastin, which is required to initiate blood coagulation. Coagulation means what? Clotting. And which also prevents the excessive loss of blood from the injured part of the body. So what are thrombocytes? Thrombocytes are also called as blood platelets, produced from fragmentation of megakaryocytes. Blood normally contains how much? 1,50,000 to 3,50,000 platelets per mm cubic of blood. Then involved in releasing a very important substance called thromboplastin, which is required to initiate clotting of blood or coagulation of blood, which also prevents the excessive loss of blood from the injured part of the body. Then let us move across this tabular column to differentiate the neutrophils, basophils, and their functions, everything, right? So two major categories of WBC: granular. Cytoplasm contains granules, nucleus usually constructed into lobes. So here neutrophils, how much? 62%. Here you can see they are constructed in the form of lobes. Here you can see the lobes. Nucleus, distinguishing feature is nucleus with 3 to 4 lobes. Here you can see granular cytoplasm stained with neutral dyes. Then engulfed bacteria. So its function is phagocytosis. Where is it produced? In the bone marrow. Then moving on to eosinophils, which constitute 2 to 3% count, increases in allergies. And here you can see nucleus with 2 lobes. With 2 lobes. Cytoplasm granules large and stained dark red with eosin, acid dye. Then engulfed bacteria secrete antitoxin associated with allergy. So this is also produced by bone marrow. So this is a very beautiful tabular column which gives you an idea about the types of WBC cells, namely the granulocytes and agranulocytes. Granulocytes like neutrophils, appearance like it looks with 3 to 4 lobes. Here you can see 3 to 4 lobes. Granular cytoplasm stained with neutral dyes. Engulf. What is the function of neutrophils? Phagocytosis. What do you mean by phagocytosis? Engulfing any foreign particle that enters the blood. And it is produced by whom? By bone marrow. Yellow bone marrow. Then eosinophils, 2 to 3% count, increases in allergies. And it is 2-lobed, granular, large, stained dark red with eosin dye. Then engulfed bacteria secrete antitoxin associated with allergy, and it is also produced by the bone marrow. Then basophils, 0.4%. Here you can see nucleus have distinctly lobed granules stained with basic dyes, that is methylene blue, release chemicals, as we already know, proteins like histamine, serotonin, and heparin for inflammation, which dilate the blood vessels, and that is also produced by the bone marrow. And lymphocytes, that is agranulocytes. Non-granular or agranulocytes, that is cytoplasm without granules. They are cytoplasm with granules. As I said, based on the nature of the granules, we differentiate the WBC into 2 main categories, that is granulocytes and agranulocytes. So smallest of the WBC, single large nucleus, produce antibodies, and it is produced by bone marrow and lymph glands, and even spleen and tonsils also. Then monocytes, as we know, monocytes are very important in what? Macrophages. They act as what? Macrophages. engulfing the foreign particles. So, basophils 0.4%, nucleus large, distinctly lobed granules, stain with basic dyes, release chemicals like histamine for inflammation which dilate blood vessels produced by bone marrow. Lymphocytes, that is non-granulocytes, where the cytoplasm do not contain granules. They are the smallest of WBC with single large nucleus, produce antibodies, and produced by whom? By bone marrow and lymph glands and also spleen and tonsils. Then monocytes 5 to 3% and which is involved in macrophages. Hope you have understood all the concepts what I have explained in this particular session about the blood corpuscles, namely the RBC, the WBC, as well as the blood platelets. These are all very important information from knowledge point of view, because all these, as I said, these are the physiological processes which is happening inside our body. We should know about it. The knowledge is going to help us out at times when needed. So I'll be back in the coming session with some more interesting concepts and points to learn from this particular chapter called Body Fluids and Circulation. Till then, goodbye and thank you.